Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts on the ranged DPS in Final Fantasy XIV. Now we are recording this just a couple of weeks before the probable date for patch 5.1. We will have an official date when the live letter airs on October 18th, most likely I should say, but we're guessing it's going to be October 29th, and I'm going to be honest, this video is just way overdue. A lot of you know I went into kind of like a mental checkout for about a month and I didn't really do any content, so I was going to do all individual job thoughts, but I feel like I can say enough about each individual range job in a relatively short enough amount of time that I'll just do this sort of light versus video. I will do a full versus for every role after 5.1 rolls around. I've been getting a lot of questions about when that's going to be making a return, but for this video, consider it like a free-form thoughts on the 3 range DPS, changes I'd like to see to any of them, and changes I'd like to see to the role overall going into 5.1. So for those who don't know, I actually changed back after many years, changed back to being a ranged DPS or a physical ranged DPS main. So Bard, Dancer, and Machinist were among 3 of the first jobs that I actually had to 80. Now I've only seriously raided on Dancer and done a little bit of dabbling with both Machinist and Bard, but my experience definitely leans towards Dancer. That being said, I do like the role overall. There's little things on each job that I'd like to see change, especially with, for me personally, Machinist actually, there are some things I definitely like to see change for that, and I think the overall role needs a bit of a bump in DPS. Consider that my almost TLDR for the video before we get into each individual job. So let's go with the one I think I can talk about the fastest, and that's Dancer. Now, of the job videos that I actually provided thoughts for, Dancer's one of the few I managed to put the video out for. Now, while the rotation in the video definitely needed some updating, something that I practically updated within a day or two of actually releasing the video, my overall thoughts on the job haven't changed much. For me, it's a fun experience that isn't too overly complex and has a lot of onus on playing with very powerful groups. That's kind of the big thing with Dancer is, you know, the skill of the group and the skill of the Dancer are two very different things. While obviously you want to be doing as well as you can as an individual, how well you do also directly is affected and affects your fellow teammates. And I really like that synergy with the rest of the team. I can contribute on the job's upper limit, but I also am greatly benefiting to the team with the raid DPS I'm actually providing to them. That being said, Dancer's personal DPS it felt a little bit on the low side, even with the massive R DPS or raid DPS that it can add in 4 and 8-man scenarios. I felt like that could use a little bit of a boost, and that maybe that could be achieved through certain gameplay mechanics as opposed to a direct potency increase. I think there were 2 or 3 things that I mentioned in the thoughts video for Dancer that I'd like to see improved. The first one is I'd like Saber Dance to extend the duration of finishing flourishes. So normally those last, I believe, about 20 seconds. It's been a while actually since I've played Dancer at this point. And, you know, it'd be nice if Saber Dance could extend those durations by 5 seconds. That way, during burst windows, the decision-making process is a little bit simpler for more players and just fits with the job. You know, it doesn't feel like you're taking time away from what the job is really about, the dances, the flourishes, just to do the super powerful on GCD potency attack with Saber Dance. It doesn't require a sort of like a cost analysis of how many of these can I do before I'm at risk of losing a finishing flourish. The second thing that I definitely wanted to improve with Dancer was improvisation. I just don't like it. It's just not a great ability for me. I've definitely managed to apply it in some great situations where I can generate 10 or 20 Esprit instantly, provide 5 seconds of increased healing, and it just kind of fits itself in. But a lot of the times it just feels like a super big inconvenience. Oh, begging everyone to come stack with the group during transition phases, and if anyone's even just a slight bit off, I end up with that like 9 Esprit. And if anyone's dead, it loses a lot of its efficiency. If people need to be spread out for an encounter, if there's a lot of moving, it's harder to integrate. And I don't know, it's just not a fun ability. I'd like to see improv have it change so that you always gain the maximum amount of Esprit regardless of how many people are in range. The only other thing I considered was increasing the total radius of their dances so that they could hit people from a little bit further away, but I've since rescinded that opinion because other jobs have the same issue. You know, monks go to cast Brotherhood and a melee or a tank is out of range or a bard is out of range, and you know, Dancer's just, you know, it's just a matter of knowing when everyone's in range, and of course having teammates that understand, you know, not being out in the middle of nowhere in the middle of a fight. Overall though, Dancer, it's a lot of fun. I think they could use a little bit of a potency bump, but like I said earlier, that's something I kind of just feel for every physical range DPS at this point. Now, Machinist is actually a job I fully recorded a thoughts video on, but just didn't have enough confidence to post it. Not because I questioned my opinion about it, I just couldn't get the wording right, and I never felt good about the way it sounded. And so, excuse me if I don't feel much confidence as I'm repeating some similar thoughts here in that section of the video. So Machinist, dude, it was real close. Dancer and Machinist are almost equal in how much I love playing them. I happen to be somebody who lives on the west coast of the United States and play on the NA servers. The suspected area for the servers is the west coast. So that immediately will come up with one of the big points we'll talk about a little bit later. But I know some people are, before I say how I feel about the job, just know my latency to the game is on the usual pretty low. So my perspective is honestly a little bit warped and may not represent what a lot of other people feel about the job, especially people playing from locations that have, over 100, over 150 ping. That being said, dude, I love Machinist. I love the fast pace. I like this sort of this trade-off of not having that many buttons. The hotbars are relatively barren for Machinist, but having the super high APM, super active, all DPS, ranged physical DPS, it's super satisfying to me. You have attacks that feel really good, sound really good with drill and air anchor. You have this fast-paced window of damage. Most of the job feels great to me. Especially I actually really like the wildfire windows and the heat blast and all that. Every time I get a crit drill, a direct crit, oh man, you can tell I'm really excited talking about it. And this is probably why I didn't like the takes that I was doing for the audio, because I almost geek out over how much I actually really enjoy this job. And I don't have as much, I guess, experience on it, so I'm not as null to that feeling, Now, that being said, I think Machinist probably has the most glaring issues of the ranged physical DPS, depending on your perspective of BARD. I know we'll get into that when we go to talk about BARD, but Machinist being such a latency-dependent job makes it really difficult for a lot of players to approach, especially players that don't have snap decision-making and aren't, way more in tune with the pace of the job. It causes global cooldown clipping, it causes missed windows, it causes missed times, and it can feel clunky if you don't have all of those things really in tune. I would easily give up a little bit of the speed on the whole wildfire window on the heat blast timings. I would make heat blast and oh man, it's been a while. Auto crossbow. I'd raise their bottom the bottom of their global cooldown to a 1.75 or something like that. I really wish they could make it not affected by skill speed at all, but Machinists generally avoid skill speed in their build anyway, so it probably wouldn't be too big of an issue. I think just raising the base, the global cooldown on that from 1.5 to 1.75, even if it would be affected by skill speed at that point, I think it would just help a lot of players. And they could maybe increase the actual potency per weapon skill to make up for the loss of a total weapon skill in your wildfire window. But just something to help the people with high latency. That's the one thing I really want to see improve with Machinist, and I'd be willing to give up a little bit of that speed that I don't have an issue with, so other players could enjoy it as much as I do. Speaking of wildfire, another problem I have with Machinist is that wildfire just doesn't feel good. There's been points where wildfire has felt good in the past. You'd see the big damage that came from the window because it used to be based on the damage you dealt during the wildfire window. Now that it's strictly based on the number of weapon skills or on global cooldown skills that you use in that window, not only is the damage very static, and so you don't have that really hype feeling when you get a big wildfire, but the wildfire number itself just kind of slipping in because it can't direct hit or crit. It's unsatisfying. I almost wish that wildfire was a guaranteed crit direct hit, even if it would kind of still have that same feeling of being too close to the same number every time, so there's not really a whole lot of excitement. It would still be nice to just have it pop a little bit more, to feel the power of the number, because when you use drill or air anchor and those get direct crits, it feels so good. And then wildfire, this ability that sits on a fairly long cooldown compared to drill and air anchor, it just doesn't have that feel. So even just for a visual representation, I would really like that. On top of the potency increases I mentioned, if they were to extend the heat blast global cooldown, I feel like they could just make it feel better to use. And finally, my biggest gripe with Machinist is actually the amount of DPS it does. Machinist is regularly described as the pure DPS ranged physical option. It has almost no DPS. In fact, it has no DPS utility and has some generic utilities such as the damage reduction for the party that's built into it. and it just doesn't do a satisfying enough amount of DPS, in my opinion, for the role that it's supposed to fit. I don't know how much of a DPS boost that the range DPS are going to be getting in 5.1. I think Machinist needs the most. You know, we used to say because it's hypermobile, because it's got instance, that it can't really have that high of a DPS because the trade-off is there. But after seeing how much the skill on a job like Black Mage has increased, the mobility that a skilled Black Mage can achieve, I don't know that I feel the same way about that anymore. So #1 gripe with Machinist, I would like to see its damage jacked up way higher than it actually is right now, especially comparative to Bard and the total raid DPS contribution of Dancer. Speaking of which, that finally leads us to Bard, and this job is the job I'm least excited about in the ranged physical DPS category. I think it's just because it didn't get that many shiny new toys. They took some of the things that were there before and fixed them up to make a little more sense, gave them one new toy that's kind of shiny but still a little bit lackluster, and said, here you go. It's very functional, it still has a lot of raid utility, and it's still very valuable to a group, assuming the Bard is playing well, or at least at the skill of the rest of the group. But something about it just doesn't feel as exciting to me. I think it's just because Machinist and Dancer feel like brand new jobs, and Bard doesn't. And, you know, that's not a knock against it. I really enjoyed Stormblood Bard, and I said they shouldn't change it much. But that definitely didn't do it any favors when it came to everyone else looking at their cool new stuff and Bard going, well, I'm a little bit better to play now at the very least. Now, one thing I'll say about Bard that I feel like improved massively, and it's something I've kind of been neglecting talking about because of how, I guess, frequent AoE is in the game now, with how easy it is to access, especially for ranged physical DPS. You know, Dancer has tons built into the songs. It's got some point-blank AoE weapon skills. It's got an AoE in Saber Dance. It can fire at targets. It's very satisfying. Machinist is very similar. You know, you have auto crossbow. You have the flamethrower, which I really actually should have probably included as a con for that part. Yeah, you can see why I wasn't super confident in the Machinist video, probably, because there's just all these little things to talk about with it that I find myself just kind of, you know, looking over. So flamethrower is kind of iffy. You know, it's I call it my take a sip of coffee button. Press it, take a sip of coffee, and by the time it's done, I will have enjoyed my coffee and put it back down. And then also you have the Bioblaster. So there's aspects to it I liked. But when it comes to Bard, man, the AoE on Bard just feels so good now. It makes me wish I could stay in Ballad forever, but the majority of it, there's like a 60-second window of really, really fun AoE DPS for me. Yeah, they're in Mage's Ballad getting an insane number of resets because they added a reset to your AoE weapons, or they added a reset to your Rain of Death through your AoE weapon skill, on top of Ballad naturally having your dot ticks having a chance to reset it as well. So it can almost get insanely fast, and it's super satisfying when that happens. Then you move into Payon, and because of the attack speed increase, you know, you are still getting resets fairly frequently because, again, your AoE weapon skill, your quick knock, is sometimes giving you these Rain of Death resets. So I find those both of those parts really, really satisfying, and even the less satisfying part of all that with Wanderer's Minuet, you know, it's fine. 60 seconds of that feeling is totally worth having 30 seconds of not as satisfying, but honestly, still not bad, really. They also did a lot to enhance the song, transitioning between the songs. It feels a lot better now, especially now that they reward you for clipping your army's Payon early. I'm glad they accepted that that's kind of the go-to play style, where people would go into Payon and they get these stacks, but they didn't really matter a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. Being able to carry that attack speed through to Wanderer's Minuet, whether it be because, you know, you didn't have a target and you had to wait with the buff until Minuet was available to use, or if you were just following a straight 100% uptime fight, it's a nice way of adding a little bit of, I guess, a little bit of cohesion to the actual design of the job. That being said, you know, while I think Bard is actually a lot of fun to play, even if I didn't find it as flashy as the other jobs, I'd say probably my biggest disappointment with Bard is Apex Arrow, their new skill. It's not that it's weak, it's that it's really awkward and just doesn't feel like it fits with the rest of the job. It kind of falls in the same category as Saber Dance, where you kind of taking a step away from everything else your job is doing to do this one other thing. Because you have it and it's part of your job and you have to integrate it somehow, right? The fact that Apex Arrow isn't like a skill you're going to time with your burst windows or somebody else's burst window most of the time, and you're really just looking to use it whenever the gauge is filled, or if it doesn't fill during your next raging window, it just feels really weird that's just all it is. Just gauge goes up and, you know, attack goes out. In an AoE, it feels great, but on a single target, it's not super satisfying of a hit, even if it direct crits, you know. It's just there isn't that really good feel good moment. At least that's the way that I feel when I'm playing Bard. It's just Apex Arrow is just not doing it for me from a satisfaction standpoint. I will say for me personally, that's kind of really only the big con. I know for some people, Bard, having lost some of its direct song utilities, and while it does rotate through songs and it has a ton of abilities that are technically songs or song references in some kind, some people feel like it moved a little bit further away from Bard than it was in the previous expansion and more into this archer/ranger role. I don't feel that way personally. I identify that a lot of my abilities directly have to do with songs. My buffs are rewards for songs, and I get that, yes, while all of those things are just affecting my arrows or my teammates, it does still feel like the most support-heavy job, even with Dancer providing the majority of the RDPS in the category. I still get enough satisfaction out of it, but I do agree that I wouldn't hate getting something more that has to do with singing for Bard. I just don't want them to be a job where they sit and they only sing. You know, I don't want to go back to having Faux Requiem, for example. It just wasn't, I didn't like using Faux Requiem in the previous expansion. It was one of my major pain points. I didn't like sacrificing DPS for songs in the older expansions, you know? So I think there are ways around it. I don't know what they are, but for those people who do feel that way about Bard, I may not entirely agree with you, but I do support them, I guess, moving more song-based abilities into the job that aren't just, you know, fancy song names for arrows. Now, as for range DPS altogether as a role, I know a lot of people have had discussions about the entire range DPS role versus Black Mage, or Monk in some cases. And this is kind of going back to the Machinist point where that job really doesn't do a satisfying enough amount of DPS for me. I do feel that way about all three jobs, and the last one, of course, being Bard. You know, they could all use just a little bit of a bump, and Yoshida has said that they are looking to do that. And they specifically named they're looking at some things for Bard, but they wouldn't tell us what. I guess because they weren't really 100% sure if they were going to do that. They keep talking about needing to tread lightly because they are very afraid of Bard becoming the mandatory range DPS choice like they've seen it be in the past. Even in times where that was kind of the case, people still occasionally lean towards Machinist back then, and so I'm hard-pressed to believe it would happen. That almost tells me they might be fulfilling people's fantasy of wanting something more Bard-esque that involves songs a little bit more, but that it would overall, you know, probably positively impact their DPS, and I think we need to see that in 5.1. I don't really like the anecdote of the Black Mage versus the 3-range physical, because I feel like it's a bit lopsided. You know, there was a thing that came out a while back where it was, you know, 2 Black Mages provide this amount of raid DPS. If you were to replace that Black Mage with any of the 3-range physical at a similar item level, at a similar skill level, you'd probably have more overall DPS, giving up the 1% raid stat buff from having the 5 different roles, and that wouldn't make up for the difference between the ranged physical and the other skilled Black Mage. Now, it's a very big anecdote. It requires a very specific, you know, high skill level, high understanding of the jobs, but it is somewhat of a valid point. I don't like that it then becomes buff ranged physical as the end result of that, because to me that says Black Mage is too strong, because it's not something the other 2 casters were dealing with. It eventually grew to expand once Monk got buffed to include Monk. Ninja's now somewhere in that category as well. So the way it's evolved, and the way the other jobs have sort of gotten these big power buffs, it seems, in the recent mini patches since 5.0 came out, it just feels like while it started with just a Black Mage comparison, it's extended to enough jobs at this point where, while the anecdote may not just require Black Mage anymore, it works. It works better than it did before, and Range Physical definitely could use a little bit of love. I would like to extend that while this video is not about them, that probably Summoner and Red Mage need a little bit of love too. Since that anecdote originally only worked with one of the 3 casters, not the entire caster role, I think that says a little bit about the strength of those 2 jobs versus the strength of Black Mage, or I guess these 5 jobs versus the strength of Black Mage. I'd say that pretty much covers my, I guess, closest to TLDR thoughts on the individual ranged physical jobs. We will be doing an official versus where we break down each individual job, we cover their pros and cons in more detail, and we overall rank them against each other. If you're looking for a ranking right now, while Dancer is my personal favorite to play, followed by Machinist, I honestly think Bard is probably in the best spot of the bunch if you are skilled enough to play it, or if it's your job of choice in the ranged physical. It's a very small margin, though. It is not a large margin, depending on the overall performance of the player on each job. I still love my Dancer, though. I still love my Machinist, and I'm just hoping for a little bit more balance going into 5.1 because, you know, I want to play range physical, and I need ultimate groups to want a range physical, so I kind of just need the role to do a little bit better now. You know, that's just kind of in my wish list for that one. But with that, that's going to be a wrap for this video. If anyone would like me to elaborate more, I mean, I can elaborate on these things more in individual videos before 5.1. It's just, I am still, you know, working myself back into producing a little bit more thoughts related content, a little bit more 14 related content, a little bit more content on the channel in general. So it's a slow work into these things, and it's going to be mostly news videos, but I really appreciate everyone's patience with even waiting for a very basic thoughts video like this on the ranged physical job. You'll hear me say that I'll probably do some other thought style videos, and I know I've said it enough times that it's mopey, and honestly I should probably stop talking about it, but the people, the content I provide to for my channel, you know, it matters a lot to me, and the people who enjoy it, you all matter a lot to me too. So it means a lot to me, and it's kind of selfish to say that, you know, I hear you, and I'm sorry it's taken so long, and I appreciate your patience, and thank you for clicking and liking the videos. Even if you don't like them, thanks for clicking and disagreeing with me in the comment section, because you're still participating in the channel. So anyway, that's going to be a wrap for me. I'm just going to throw some stock footage of each of the jobs probably over this, because again, I don't feel 100% confident, so I should probably get some very basic editing out and get this video released, so that way I don't second guess it and not upload something again. So thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and let me know what your thoughts are on the individual ranged physical DPS in the comment section of the video below. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.